My name is Natalie Pierce, and last week my parents sat across from me with the calmest voices I'd ever heard and told me they would raise my rent triple it unless I agreed to become my sister's unpaid maid, not a helper. Not just for a while, a full schedule cleaning, cooking, childcare every single day, with no pay and no choice. They didn't yell or threaten in any dramatic way. They simply delivered it like it was the most reasonable arrangement in the world, as if my independence, my career, and my time existed for their convenience. And something inside me didn't break, it froze. Sharp, silent, final. They truly believed I would fold the way I always had. They believed I would stay right where they put me. What they didn't know was that I had already discovered something they never expected, and I was only hours away from disappearing without a trace, leaving them to face the chaos they created. If you've ever been pushed into a corner by the people who were supposed to love you, stay with me. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the moment I walked out that door, everything they thought they controlled began to fall apart. On my way to the hospital the next morning, I realized this didn't start last night. It stretched back years, woven into the rhythm of my family, long before I ever understood what unfairness felt like. My sister Melissa Pierce had always been the one the entire household seemed to orbit around. When we were children, she was enrolled in private academies with glossy brochures and expensive uniforms, while I went to the local public school. Because, as my mother explained, someone in this family has to be practical. Melissa took ballet, piano, competitive art classes, even summer language camps in Europe. I stayed home folding laundry, wiping counters, and making sure the house looked presentable before my parents returned from work. My mother, Elaine Pierce, never hid her preferences. Whenever Melissa excelled at something, she would beam proudly and call her our star. If I accomplished anything, the response was always a version of "that's good," but Melissa has been doing more. It wasn't said cruelly, it was said casually, which made it worse. Even then, the message had been clear. Melissa was the one worth investing in, and I was the one expected to manage everything else. As we grew older, the pattern calcified. Melissa moved on to a lifestyle carved out by my parents' generosity: boutique shopping trips, spa memberships, and long weekends in Napa, gifted for her mental reset. Meanwhile, I worked through college, took night shifts, and learned how to stretch every paycheck. When I finally graduated and became a hospital billing specialist, I wanted distance, not emotional distance, just enough space to breathe. But my schedule was demanding, and the apartment my parents offered was 10 minutes from the hospital. $800 was affordable enough that I agreed, even though something about it felt like a tether I couldn't name at the time. My parents considered that amount a favor, often reminding me how lucky I was, even though their income put them comfortably in the upper tier of suburban wealth. Anytime I asked for a boundary or tried to assert independence, I was met with the same refrain: family helps each other. Melissa needs more support. You're stronger, you can handle it. After Melissa married a lavish vineyard wedding funded largely by our parents, her spending only grew. She developed a taste for luxury childcare, high-end meal plans, and curated home decor. Yet, despite all that, she relied on my parents for everything from babysitting to covering unexpected expenses. Over time, they stopped viewing Melissa as an adult who made choices and started viewing me as the built-in solution for anything she couldn't handle. Every favor became an expectation. Every expectation became a responsibility. And every responsibility slowly turned into an obligation I never agreed to. The night they cornered me wasn't random. It was the culmination of years spent being pushed into a role they believed I owed them. As I parked at the hospital that morning, my phone vibrated. A message from Elaine lit up the screen: family meeting on Friday. I expect you to be cooperative. When I walked into the dining room, which always felt more like a private event hall than part of a home, they were already seated, arranged with the formality of an executive board meeting. Elaine Pierce slid a neatly typed document across the polished table toward me before I had even taken my seat. her expression composed in that particular way that meant the decision had been made before I arrived. I glanced at the paper, then at her, waiting for an explanation. She clasped her hands and said almost pleasantly, "This is a simple outline to help the household run smoothly." The outline was anything but simple. In crisp bullet points, she had listed tasks the way a manager would assign duties to a hired maid. Deep clean the first and second floors every week, handle all laundry, including sorting and folding, reorganize the pantry as needed, and prepare dinner 3 evenings a week, recipes chosen by her. Before I could process the absurdity, Melissa Pierce leaned forward, tapping the page with her manicured finger. "And I added a few things you forgot, Mom." She turned to me with the sharp, satisfied smile of someone who believes the victory is already theirs. "I need you to take care of the kids whenever I have real estate events. Brandon's schedule is full, and I can't be juggling childcare. You're better with routines anyway." She spoke as if I were a built-in service her life had been missing. Then she continued, "Also, the kids need healthier meals. More variety. So you'll plan daily menus balanced organic, something appropriate for their age." Hearing her speak so casually about handing me responsibility for her entire household made my stomach tighten. I pushed the document back across the table. "I have a full-time job," I said. "I can't take on all of this." Elaine's smile thinned. "Natalie, we're talking about family cooperation. Melissa is overwhelmed. You're single, you have more time, and $800 for that apartment is already generous." I shook my head. "This isn't cooperation. This is unpaid labor." Before I could say more, Howard Pierce struck his palm against the table, not loudly, but firmly enough to cut the room in half. "Enough. You will stop arguing and face the situation like an adult." He pointed at the document. "If you refuse to help, the rent becomes $2,500 starting next month." His tone left no space for negotiation. To him, this was a logical conclusion, a fair exchange. Melissa folded her arms, the corner of her mouth lifting as though she were watching exactly what she had predicted unfold. It wasn't anger in her eyes, it was expectation. Control. Entitlement. And in that moment, with the weight of their decisions pressing toward me, I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't a sudden request or a moment of desperation. They had planned this, carefully, quietly, and they fully expected me to fall in line the way I always had. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up the lease I had signed 2 years earlier. The file had been sitting untouched in a folder labeled "Housing," something I never thought I would need to revisit, but as the document loaded, a strange uneasiness crept over me. I scrolled to the section listing the owner of the unit and froze when I saw the name Crownstone Property Management. It wasn't my parents' name, nor any entity tied to them. A company, one of the largest residential management groups in our county, owned the apartment. That meant the arrangement I had been living under wasn't a family lease at all. It was a sublease. And because my parents had never told Crownstone they were renting the unit out to me, the entire setup was illegal. I searched the company's policies online, reading each line carefully. The penalty for unauthorized subleasing was clearly stated: a fine of $5,000, plus mandatory surrender of the unit within 30 days. My parents hadn't just been overcharging me. They had placed themselves in direct violation of a corporate lease agreement. And knowing them, their obsession with reputation, the way they clung to their standing in their gated community, this wasn't simply a financial issue. The humiliation of being exposed would devastate them. While that realization settled in my mind, shifted from shock to strategy. If they could plan their maid schedule behind my back, I could plan my exit without theirs. I opened several apartment finder tabs and filtered options by commute time to the hospital. Anything within 15 minutes would work. After an hour of browsing, I found a newly renovated complex offering a 1-bedroom with an early move-in date. I submitted an application immediately, uploading pay stubs and identification before I could second-guess myself. Next, I checked availability for moving trucks and scheduled a mid-morning U-Haul pickup for the following week. I added a vacation request through the hospital's scheduling system, selecting a day I knew wouldn't conflict with patient billing deadlines. Every step I took was calculated and quiet. I moved through the apartment collecting small items, documents, jewelry essentials, and packing them into discreet storage bins that I tucked into my closet. I didn't inform my parents, Melissa, or anyone else. Silence was the safest place to work from. If they had been orchestrating this for months, I needed every advantage I could get. When the last task on my list was done, I refreshed my email expecting nothing for at least a day. But a new message flashed at the top of my inbox. The subject line made my breath catch for a moment. Approved move-in date confirmed for next Friday. Before dawn on Friday, when the entire neighborhood was still wrapped in silence, I began packing the first boxes. There was no hesitation, no last-minute wavering. Every movement felt steady and intentional. I dismantled the apartment one drawer at a time, folding clothes, taping boxes, stacking them neatly near the door. The kitchen cabinets, once lined with the groceries I bought after every shift, emptied quickly. The walls, which had held my calendars and small framed photos, looked bare and unfamiliar. It struck me how little of this place had ever belonged to me beyond the rent I paid and the expectations I absorbed. As the sun began to rise, I carried the last set of boxes down the stairs and loaded them into the back of the U-Haul. The air was cold but sharp in a way that made each breath feel new. Standing in the doorway one final time, I scanned the apartment from corner to corner. It was spotless cleaner than the day I moved in, not out of sentiment, but as the final act of closing something that had held me too tightly for too long. I placed the keys into the metal lockbox outside the building entrance, hearing the soft click as they dropped to the bottom. That sound felt like a door shutting both literally and in every other sense. Back inside the truck, I opened my email and typed the last message I owed anyone from that address. I addressed it to Crownstone Property Management, attaching a copy of the sublease violation clause along with the dates I had occupied the unit. I wrote clearly, concisely, without anger. They could verify everything themselves. When I hit send, I felt a quiet, steady certainty. I drove directly to the new apartment without stopping, without looking in the rearview mirror. My phone vibrated against the center console again and again, calls, messages, notifications lighting up the screen with names I had known my entire life. I didn't answer any of them. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because nothing they could say would undo what had already been done. And I no longer felt obligated to absorb their reactions. Hours later, after the last box was inside my new unit, and the door clicked shut behind me, peace settled into the space like it had been waiting there all along. Across town, my absence was finally noticed. I wasn't there to witness it, but I imagined the moment they arrived at the old apartment, Elaine leading the way, Melissa close behind Howard, expecting to scold me before breakfast. They unlocked the door and stepped inside. A hollow echo answered them. The apartment was empty, stripped of every trace of me. A chair scraped the floor as Elaine sat down hard, the realization sinking in with a weight she had never anticipated. Her voice broke the silence. She really left. When I was hanging the curtains in my new apartment, a notification appeared across my screen. At first, I thought it was another missed call, but the subject line caught my attention immediately: Crownstone Compliance Notice. I opened it and scanned the message. The management company had reviewed the complaint and confirmed the violation. A $5,000 penalty was issued, and the contract for the unit my parents claimed as their own would be terminated in 30 days. They were instructed to vacate or face additional legal action. Money had never frightened them, but losing a property in a wealthy neighborhood being forced out publicly was the kind of humiliation they had spent their entire lives avoiding. I set my phone aside and continued smoothing the fabric of the curtains, letting the silence settle back into the room. Another alert came through minutes later, this time forwarded from a friend who still lived in my parents' gated community. The HOA had initiated a formal review of Melissa's home. Several neighbors had submitted complaints about unregistered domestic help entering and leaving at irregular hours. The association placed her household on a 6-month monitoring list, something the board almost never did unless they believed a family was hiding misconduct. The message thread beneath the screenshot was filled with speculation, none of it flattering. As the morning went on, more consequences surfaced. Melissa, no longer able to lean on me for free labor, had reached out to a housekeeping agency. The rates were attached to the text she had sent Brandon: $240 per session, 3 sessions a week. Nearly $3,000 a month, not including occasional deep cleaning or childcare add-ons. By noon, they had argued loudly enough that a neighbor recorded part of it from their porch. Brandon accused her of overspending. She accused him of refusing to understand how busy she was. Neither of them acknowledged that the entire situation had been built on expecting me to shoulder responsibilities they never intended to compensate. Word spread quickly through their social circle. Families who once tried to impress my parents now whispered about fines, oversight, and the household that had internal issues. In a community where reputation functioned like a currency, the loss was severe. No one confronted them directly, but invitations slowed. Polite greetings grew strained, and the shift in status became unmistakable. The emotional unraveling followed soon after. Howard blamed Melissa for escalating everything. Melissa blamed me for leaving. Elaine cried to anyone who would listen, insisting she had lost the good daughter, as if the version of me who obeyed without protest had simply vanished. Late that evening, my phone lit up again with a message from a mutual acquaintance who had been present during a family discussion. After hours of arguing, Brandon finally snapped and said the words that cut through the room so sharply that the conversation reportedly stopped cold. If Natalie were still here, none of this would have happened. The first week in my new apartment, I realized I was breathing easier than I had in years. Mornings felt lighter, as if the air itself no longer carried expectations I couldn't meet. I settled into a rhythm, quickly waking up with no dread making coffee in a kitchen that finally belonged to me, and heading to the hospital with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt since becoming a hospital billing specialist. Without the weight of my family circling my thoughts, my focus sharpened. I handled complex cases more efficiently, finished reports earlier than usual, and even found myself offering help to colleagues who often struggled with insurance claims. Each day felt like proof that peace wasn't something I had imagined. It was real. It was happening. After work, I returned to the apartment and unpacked the remaining boxes. Decorating the place became its own kind of therapy. I bought a new lamp, framed a few prints I had saved for months, and replaced the generic shower curtain with one I actually liked. Every purchase, no matter how small, reminded me that this space existed because of my effort, not because someone allowed me to be there. My sleep improved almost immediately. Nights were quiet. No buzzing anxiety. No spiraling thoughts about rent threats or forced responsibilities. I woke rested, steady, and aware of how badly I had needed distance from the people who insisted they were helping me, while shaping my life into something unrecognizable. Freedom revealed itself in small moments, closing my door without fear of judgment, rearranging furniture because I wanted a change, cooking dinner that didn't have to fit someone else's demands. Even silence sounded different here. Not empty, but calm. One evening, after a long shift, I returned home and opened my laptop to check a few messages. A new email from Elaine appeared at the top of my inbox. The subject line read, "You owe us a conversation." I clicked it open without expecting anything new, but the tone was sharper than usual. She insisted I had abandoned the family, accused me of acting ungrateful, and ended with a familiar line about how she had sacrificed too much to be treated this way. The message wasn't surprising. What caught my attention was how numb I felt reading it. No anger, no guilt, no impulse to defend myself. Just a quiet understanding that the version of me they expected, the obedient daughter, The one who rearranged her life to keep them comfortable no longer existed. I closed the email and hovered over the reply button, but the moment stretched without movement. Instead of answering, I opened the settings on my phone and scrolled through my contact list. One by one, I blocked every number connected to my family. Then I returned to my inbox, selected Elaine's email, and blocked it as well. The screen went silent. The room felt even quieter. Cutting off their access wasn't revenge. It was the final step in reclaiming my life. Losing control over me was the consequence they never imagined, and the one that mattered more than every fine investigation or argument they had endured. One quiet afternoon, I received the last letter my mother ever sent me. It arrived in a plain envelope with my name written in her steady handwriting, the same script she used on birthday cards when I was a child. For a moment, I just held it, unsure whether opening it would trigger anything: anger, sadness, guilt. But when I finally unfolded the pages, the words felt strangely distant, as if they were meant for someone I no longer was. She accused me of selfishness, insisted that families work through things, and claimed that I had abandoned responsibilities she believed were naturally mine. The message circled around blame, never once acknowledging the decisions that drove me away. I finished reading it without feeling the sting she intended. Instead, a quiet understanding settled in. Sometimes the people who should make you feel safest are the ones who teach you what danger looks like. I folded the letter once, then tore it calmly down the middle, letting the pieces fall into the trash. There was no dramatic flourish, no lingering hesitation. The gesture was simple, final, and necessary. Moments later, I stepped onto the balcony. The air was cool, the city humming softly beneath me. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't replaying arguments or anticipating demands. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit someone else's comfort. I was just standing there, breathing, aware of how much strength it had taken to choose myself. Growth doesn't happen in a single moment, but in a series of decisions, small, steady ones, that lead you away from what breaks you. Moving into my new apartment, blocking their numbers, refusing to answer the letter. Each act was a reminder that autonomy isn't granted. It's claimed. I had spent years believing compliance was the same as love, believing sacrifice was the price of belonging. But distance taught me something far more valuable. Boundaries aren't walls, they're lifelines. And enforcing them doesn't make you cruel, it makes you whole. Standing on that balcony, I knew with absolute certainty that I had stepped out of a cycle I was never meant to live in. I wasn't going back. Not to the guilt, not to the manipulation, not to the version of myself they kept trying to mold. My life was finally mine, shaped by my choices, my effort, and my courage to walk away. Before I close this story, I want to leave you with the truth. I learned the hardest way. You don't owe anyone your entire life, not even the people who raised you. Protecting your boundaries isn't selfish. It's how you survive in a healthy way. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. It means more than you know. If you've ever faced pressure or unrealistic expectations from your family, what did you do to protect your boundaries? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective.